Hello everyone. Now we will move on to chapter 4 about seals engraving techniques. In the first session, I would like to give you a brief introduction of tools and materials. Let's start with the Chinese brush. We write in manuscript with the one which is made of weasel's hair, since the type of brush is finely elastic with a finer tip which is suitable for producing detailed lines. And next comes the cutting knife. We often use the one whose brand is Yongzi. And blade differs greatly in width, including 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 millimeters, or even 1 centimeter. You can have your own preference. I preferred a wider blade, and most of the sealed engravers like to use the one with a blade width of 8 millimeters. And then is the ink paste. This ink paste that I use is made of my friend, but in terms of color, there are mainly an orange, cinnabar, and yellow pastes. And in terms of moisture content, it can be classified into dry and wet pastes. Dry pastes are suitable for the seal cuts and made of characters with fine and thin lines. And on the other hand, wet pastes are suitable for the one with characters which express an artist's own emotions, because it has a strong visual impact, so it is better to use the wet paste. And now I'd like to introduce impressions of seals and dictionaries, which are similar to reference books. We generally choose impressions of seals preserved in the Shanghai Museum and the Palace Museum, because there are a large number of seals included, collected, and they are authoritative. Then I will introduce the Lianshu paper and the copy paper. Now take a look at the small square cut from Lianshu paper. The paper is named after the place called Lianshu in Fujian province, and it is a very special local brand. It is suitable for impressing a seal because the paper is made from bamboo pulp and it is very thin, which could make the seal's details clearly seen. Copy paper, as the name indicates, is for copy. It is even thinner than Lianshu paper. And if we want to copy the seal, we will cover it on the seal, and we have to use thinner paper while copying the seal. And there are more other materials. This is a glass plate and a cover plate, and they have different functions. The glass plate is suitable to place over thin seals such as the Yuanzhu seal and the Manbai seal. It is extremely flat with a layer of paper in the middle, and the seal will fit well on the glass plate with a clear impression. The cover plate is made of bamboo shavings, and it seems wavy in shape, and it is said that it was invented by Japanese artists. After impressing the seal, we need to reverse the stone and draw lines with our fingernails to help impress it. However, if the lines are not in the right place, they may cause damage to the side, so paper made of bamboo shavings were invented, which is the cover plate. The cover plate can be pushed back and forth after we place it over the seal, and the ripples on the plate are used to flatten the seal. And then I will introduce seal stones. Different from green stone and marbles, the hardness of this stone is just 2 points only, and it is very easy to carve the seal on it. It is the most suitable material for seal cutting at the moment. Materials like ivory, agate, jade are relatively much harder, so they are not popular seal stones. Next, I'm gonna introduce the cutting techniques in seals engraving. And let's start with chomdao or swift knife carving technique. People named seal carving techniques in various ways, and most of them were ridiculous. Just like Zhendao, Doudao, or in more names or carving schools, which are totally 36 or 72 or even 108, and no one really get them well. However, if we take a close look at it, regarding method and speed, there are only two seals engraving techniques, which are chomdao, the sweet knife technique, and the chidao, the chopping cut technique. First, let's go from chomdao, the swift knife technique, and we can draw on a few strokes to demonstrate what it is. And it is quite easy as we draw on a few lines here and wait them to dry. Chomdao means to push your cutting knife forward just like this and keep moving. Okay, let's continue. And we can hear from the sound that the cutting knife moves forward and holds against the seal surface. And this technique is widely used in carving seals with sensational fittings. As the sound expresses a lot and creating a mighty picture in battles or wars. And because of the chomdao, the seal it produces is with great strength, bold, powerful, and like this. So it is chomdao swift carving technique which helps convey a strong sense of tearing the stone apart. Next, I would like to talking about chopping cut techniques or chidao, and drawing two lines with some Chinese brush. A chopping cut technique is mainly used by the seals engraving in Zhejiang school, and it conveys more ideas and thoughts of men of letters or scholars. And generally speaking, carvers in Jiangsu province and Zhejiang province often use this technique. And back to history, it was often applied by different schools in the Ming and the Qing dynasties. When we use swift knife techniques, and our arms push the carving knife forward with a horizontal force, while the force is vertical in chopping cut technique. And how did that happen? We press a cutting knife with one followed by another, just like we cut something with a knife. And there is a tiny spot between two cuts inside, which is the score where the cut and hinge together. The scores are opposite to what produced by swift knife. Lines by swift cutting knife are smooth, while those by chopping cut are rough. Seals engraving carved by chopping cut techniques has the charm of literalists and the sense of educated people in ancient China liked most. For this technique, the artists cut at a very low speed, which gives us a sense of elegance and the same as what we would feel in south of the China. followed by another is tightly joined. In other words, you will feel refreshed by using swift knife, but chopping cut technique is more implicit. So there are two different aesthetic forms you may have tried. When using chopping cut technique, you don't have to rush. You have to concentrate on the cutting with a calm mind, which forms a sharp contrast with swift knife. And look at this line. In fact, if you look inside with a magnifying glass, one cut is closely followed by another with several spots. So that's all for the introduction of chopping cut technique. Previously, I have introduced the swift knife and chopping cut techniques, and today I would like to talking about the combination of these two cutting techniques. And why are we talking about this? Because we mix two techniques during the sealed cutting for the most of the time. And how can this happen? It is ridiculous to only have one technique through the whole process. For example, when you imitate the sealed cuttings made by Qi Bai Shi, only swift knife techniques is applied. However, when you imitate sealed cutting of Zhejiang school, you have to apply chopping cut technique rather than a swift carving technique. We may try a Chinese character to check the theory. Let's take character Shan from the phrase Shanghai as example, and the character will be carved in the form of small seal script. So let's take a look. This is character Shan. It consists of horizontal lines and arc lines with a neat arrangement. In engraving a character, to engrave the line below, for instance, we have to move the cutting knife forward with one cut closely followed by another, the same as a bulldozer moves. And chopping cut techniques can be further classified into big one or the small one. And why for this classification? And the chopping cut techniques is mainly used by the earlier Zhejiang school, and its scores from cutting were particularly noticeable. And then the new Zhejiang school of seal engraving was founded by Wang Fan. So in order to highlight the characters, scores from cutting faded, and that's the change you may find. In other words, scores between cuts become very subtle, and only by the close and careful look can you notice them. They look smooth from distance, yet they are rough if you step closer. This is called small chopping cuts, which depend largely on the shape of characters, but that's not a feature of big chopping cuts. And I have carved this line with chopping cut technique, and then I will use the swift knife technique to carve the second line. And it is obviously that the line is swiftly carved with only two cuts. And you can easily notice some deep scores left down there, which was described by Su Dongpo, who was the great poet in the Song dynasty, and he said that the tumbling rocks thrust into the air and the roaring waves dashed upon the shore. They are totally two different styles, but these two styles are used for certain purposes. In order to illustrate the combination of Chongdao and Qidao, I have made a sharp contrast between these two techniques, which have purposes respectively. Now I will demonstrate their combination, and there is a distinct difference between them. Let me show you the example and show you the way. And when the cutting knife turns round, I have to be very careful. But if carving a long line, you can feel that I will express the cutting knife forward when it turns round. This is the cutting method. Therefore, both techniques are used in seal engraving. They are not separated from each other. You can see me that when I move the cutting knife, it will turn around, which should be regarded as one of the techniques in chopping cut. And this one, the cutting knife moves forward, which causes press, so it should also be included in chopping cut technique. So when carving, we don't have to be rigid when applying to the two techniques, and otherwise we will be too stereotyped. We should be practical, and a combination of the two is the best way. Okay, so much for today. Thanks for watching.